My name is Aida Farhat. Welcome to Conscious Part Solutions. My guest today is James Bartley. Welcome, James. I'm excited to have you here. I'm super excited. Let me just be clear about that. I'm really excited to have you on as a guest today. I will share a short bio of James. Most of you, well, some of you may know or be familiar with James' work. I definitely am. When we're talking about my lab and super soldier and interdimensional beings and so forth, most of us are familiar with your work and see you and hold you in high regards. I surely do. Quickly, James Bartley is an international lecturer and is regarded as one of the world's leading authorities on reptilian abductions and military abductions. My labs, having investigated these subjects for over 30 years, James has lectured in numerous places, including Philadelphia, Roswell, Las Vegas, San Diego, Memphis, Mississippi, Sydney, Melbourne, the Blue Mountains, Coffs Harbor, Byron Bay, and Brisbane, and was a featured speaker at the first ever REPCON in Bury, am I saying that correctly? Bury, England, in May of 2016. He has taken part in numerous webinars and was featured in the first ever full length documentary about reptilians called Don't Mention the Reptilians. James' podcast is called The Cosmic Switchboard Show, and we will make sure that all his information is added into the comment section for anybody that's interested. I highly recommend you go back into his work. There's so much information that you could really become well aware of a lot of the agendas that are playing out. Um, so he has the Cosmic Switchboard. Also, James is also available for consults about alien abductions, military abductions. He has a Facebook page under his name, James Bartley, and I believe there's a group there as well. Yeah, the Cosmic Switchboard has a Facebook group. So there's plenty of ways to reach out to him. And I started years ago in 2011. So it's been a long time. I've been a follower of James and have learned a great deal from him. Welcome, James. I am so excited to have you. Thank you so
Uh,
much for coming on.
I'm excited too. Been looking forward to this discussion with you, Ada.
Yeah.
How do I
So
pronounce your name properly?
Ida.
Ida.
The A is silent.
Okay.
Yes. Ironically enough, I have family that just came in from Louisiana because there's this uh, big um, storm coming in named Ida,
Oh.
and I think it was the same day that Katrina was. I think
Hmm.
so. Yeah. Well, how ironic is that? That we have it on the same day. That this message coming out to evacuate Louisiana and so forth. So I had family come in early this morning. So my day has been with a bunch of young girls and my sister. It took them over 20 hours to get here. That normally would take 7.5 or 8 hours because of the traffic trying to get out and people trying to evacuate and so forth. But enough of that. Welcome, James. I'd like for you to share with the audience more updated information, maybe of your perspective on what's happening with, well, the first off, interdimensional. I have a question, and I've always not got, well, I've wanted to ask this for a long time and not really gotten clear info or a clear answer on the difference between interdimensional and alien. Like, what is the difference? Because I get confused when I listen to different people, and I kind of just sum them all up into one thing, which is they're not, well, maybe they are us. What is your thoughts on that? Do you,
That's a
okay.
very good question, and it's been used that dichotomy between extraterrestrial and interdimensional as a way to create a cleavage within the UFO ET field in particular. There seems to be this notion that uh, extraterrestrial on the one hand and interdimensional on the other are mutually exclusive. But I believe that certain ET races, and increasingly it seems from the anecdotal testimony from many my labs, as well as what's come out, what's been leaked out from whistleblowers within the deep black aerospace ET projects, that there is a means for species and races to be corporeal, physical in our dimension, but be able to access other dimensions out of phase of our own. Nikola Tesla said something to the effect that with resonance, everything is possible, anything is possible. I think back to a story, Bill Hamilton, one of the great researchers of the old days. He's been pretty much retired as far as I know. He used to be with the Air Force Security Service. Back in the day, he was a Russian linguist and one of the top UFO researchers. He developed a lot of sources in the Antelope Valley, where the aerospace community, a lot of it is based. And one of his sources told him of a device found on board one particular craft. It was a craft that was recovered in Vietnam in 1958. And within the craft was a device which they referred to as I think it was called a transspatial resonator. And what this device did was it allowed the occupants to calibrate the craft and the occupants to the resonant frequency of whatever universe or dimension they wanted to enter. Think of two bubbles side by side, each beating or resonating to a separate frequency, just out of phase of each other. This transspatial resonator allows the occupants of that particular craft, that particular species, to go from one to another and back again. Now, we that have had astral travel experiences, many of us, we know that the places that we've been to astrally, they're more than just dreamscapes. There seems to be societies in some of these places, activity. There seems to be structure, some degree of density, physicality. I know on one occasion, I hadn't quite, lack of a better term, raised my vibe enough. And I left my body astrally and was trying to pass through a window to go on astral travel, my bedroom window, but I couldn't do it. I got about a quarter of the way through. I felt the texture of the glass, and I realized, well, I'm just not in the proper state to do this. So I willed myself to back out of it, you know. So the point of relevance is that everything depends on frequency and resonance, and some ET races have mastered the ability to not only operate extensively in our plane of existence, in our cosmos, but in other ones. And there are other races or species or intelligences that more or less operate out of phase of our own, but can still interact oftentimes with malign influence upon human beings. I've had Jerry Marzinski and Sherry Sweeney on my show, and Jerry has been in the psychological field for over 30 years. He used to work at the largest sanitarium, mental asylum in Georgia, which was the largest in the world at the time. And then later, he worked in the prison system in Arizona, where he interacted with a lot of so-called schizophrenic inmates. And he has taken issue with the whole concept of schizophrenia because it describes all the audio hallucinations, voices in the head, etc., to just a chemical imbalance of some sort, right? Whereas he's a firm believer, as am I, that the voices that many people hear, the intrusive thoughts that can malignly influence people's behavior, character, and hence their destiny, that these voices are coming from very real intelligences. And these particular intelligences, many of them, I feel, are interdimensional. They're all around us at all times. Some people have, for lack of a better term, a better firewall than others. They can block and screen out these intrusive thoughts and voices, others not so good. And certain drugs, crystal methadone, the whole family of amphetamines in particular, can really open one up to that type of malevolent manipulation. So that's just another example of how the interdimensional can interfere with us. And I do believe, and I'll explain more, in the second part of our discussion here, how some drugs, some treatments, let's say, I referenced crystal meth, illicit drug use, but certain pharmaceuticals and certain treatments, let's say, can really open people up to, lack of a better term, entity possession. And I do believe, I refer to negative entities, be they extraterrestrial or interdimensional or subterrestrial, because that's a whole another category that's part of all this. Beneath our feet are large cavern systems where there's just a whole variety of different species that live within the bowels of the earth. And there are some quite advanced civilizations down there that want nothing to do with the surface world. They think they hold this beneath contempt. Other civilizations down there are of the archontic variety that would like nothing more than to manipulate us and enslave us. And actually, in many cases, particularly the reptilians down there, some of the reptilians down there actually use humans as a food source. So that's a whole other category. One more point about the whole concept of extraterrestrial and interdimensional and subterrestrial. It's not mutually exclusive. You just take the case of the reptilians. Some reptilians are literally extraterrestrial. They come here in craft, or they come here through stargates, and they're from other worlds in our cosmos, other constellations, what have you, star constellations. Many of them have set up bases here. Them and other ET races have set up bases here, underwater and underground. They've been here for so long, they might as well be considered Earthlings, and manipulated the surface population for so long, manipulating the bloodlines, intermixing their DNA with our own, creating a hybrid priesthood class, if you will, the ruling hybrid plantation managers, which are causing all these problems for the human race. They're not human. The consciousness working through them is not human. Also, the subterrestrials, some of them interact with off-worlders. They have an alliance with them. Some of these outposts that have been set up underground by these ET races, like I said, have been here so long, they might as well be considered Earthlings. And like I said, it's not mutually exclusive, because some of the subterrestrials, like reptilians in our example, have the ability to alter their density and frequency and literally take people up as hosts through the genetic manipulation, lo these many millennia. Some bloodlines and some people have a genetic, indeed spiritual predisposition to being taken up as a host, where these entities can comfortably inhabit their bodies, not just in sleep, but during normal waking consciousness. And sometimes the host person is aware of this, especially if they're an adept, they're involved in some cult activity, et cetera, et cetera. Other people may not be consciously aware, but they manifest characteristics such as narcissism, extreme lack of empathy, cruelty, the kind of characteristics we've become accustomed to in positions of power and influence on our planet. So many of those people are hybrids, not only for the reptilians, but for other ET races that want to enslave us, depopulate us, and manipulate us. So in a nutshell, that's what my thoughts are. One last thing is, like I said, some of these extraterrestrials have the ability to cross dimensional barriers. I believe that the veil between worlds are thinning, and the purpose, part of the purpose for programs like CERN and similar programs, the 5G rollout, is to create rents and tears in the membranes, keeping these worlds apart. I think that's not only from a ceremonial sense, are they doing things to bring in more entities? And from a pharmaceutical sense, are they doing things to bring more entities in, but energetically through frequency modulation? They're doing things to bring in more entities. I think that's part of why so many people today are just succumbing to madness, just losing it basically. And we're seeing this with the rollout of these treatments, for lack of a better term. Some people are just acting as if they've been replaced in a matter of hours or days. So that's part of the problem too. I do believe that there's an entity influence, entity hosting aspect to a lot of these treatments, so-called. But in a nutshell, that's what I wanted to say. There is a hardware aspect to the extraterrestrials. The people that say there's only interdimensional and extraterrestrial conveniently leave out the fact that over the years, actual extraterrestrial technology hardware has come into possession of deep black elements of the military and aerospace community. That cannot be written off as, oh, they're all just interdimensional, because they have the hardware and they've back engineered that technology and created fleets of their own type of craft that are based on extraterrestrial design, propulsion systems, fuel, etc.
I mean, I could listen to you for ever.
Thank you.
James, honestly, I'm not saying that to, I learned so much from you, and while I am definitely able to receive the information and feel into it and know that that what you're sharing is definitely I feel accurate. Well, I mean, your experience with, I mean, through the years that I've watched you, your experience with doing lectures and on the Dracos and so forth and so on has just been, out of everybody that I've listened to, has been more influential on making sense of my own experiences to understand and put things together. But there was a couple things that I wanted to um, mention, and one is, you are absolutely correct. I was one of those people that used to take medication. I was diagnosed ADHD, bipolar, so forth, so on. I don't take any of those medicines now, but I definitely remember feeling wide open and getting a lot of negative thought forms during the time I was on these medications. But I do have a strong firewall, if you will, and fully aware that I was being, um, it's almost like an impeding, uh, these thought forms are almost, I don't know how to explain. I don't get it so much anymore now, but a lot of people do go through these and they lose their minds. They end up in these sane asylums and um, situations and mental hospitals where they're diagnosed with all these different illnesses, and the medical field really doesn't have answers for what these people are experiencing, and it's unfortunate. I mean, I didn't plan for our conversation to go that way, but now that you've mentioned it, I definitely am sensitive to it, because I remember my own experiences of them showing up at my doorstep and considering taking me away, and I told them to get the hell out of my house, excuse my language, quite literally, and they did. And that was during the time when I was being highly targeted and so forth. So I've been able to put a lot of my own experiences together through listening to you and other people. But what I was going to mention to you was Simon Parks had a badge that he was holding up that said the Royals Air Force. Do you know anything about that? The
You mean the British Royal Air Force, RAF?
I don't know, but I'm wondering if they have something to do with considering that the Draco Reptilian consider themselves to be the royals and
Mm.
the ones that manipulate and control our, the frequency fence and everything else. I'm not saying it's only the Dracos. I mean, there are other, we know that, for sure, other star families or star people or whatever you want to call. here as well. I mean, what is your thoughts on, like, well, the reason I'm bringing that up, let me just be because I had a man that came from the Air Force. His name was Rick Johnson. I don't believe that was his real name. Long story short, he was in the Air Force and he worked at the Pentagon the last 5 years of his 20-year career in the Air Force. And he definitely, well, he said to me, if I didn't know you were special, I left you a long time ago. And not that I'm special, but that they had an eye on me for whatever reason. And I'm confident. I don't want to get too far into that, but my point is, are you aware of these beings that work in the like are part of the Air Force that are doing off-world stuff? Like, what do you say to that?
As far as the Draco is concerned, and when we refer to the Draco, we're talking about the winged reptilians, the gargoyles of old. They're the reptilians that have wings that come out from, behind them, and they're quite big, quite robust. Some feel they are at the top of the heap as far as the various reptilian species are concerned. I think there's something to that. There is a caste within the Draco that are white. We call them the white Draco, and they seem to be kind of their elite, the royalty, if you will. So the Draco seem to have superiority over some of the other reptilian races that don't have wings. And the white Draco seem to be at the top of the heap within the Draco scheme of things. The reptilians in general have been the ones that foisted this whole concept of a caste system upon the human race. I believe what happened was, after the most recent series of celestially driven cataclysms, and we're right on the cusp of all that again, I believe that it's because of so-called Planet X, so-called Nibiru, this dwarf sun solar system. There's abundant evidence for this. It's already in our solar system. If we didn't have this perma-chemtrail haze that's all around the planet, countless people would have seen it already. Now, keeping in mind the muggles nature of so many people that are oblivious to everything, that just believe whatever they're told. If they don't recognize the chemtrails being formed directly above them, why should they even notice a second sun, right? But
isn't that something, James? Though
yes,
it almost blows my mind how people just. I mean, but I remember saying to myself, "How did I not know this till I wake?" When I had my awakening, it was almost like, "Are you?" It was so overwhelming and mind blowing, the information that I was becoming aware of and what I knew I could feel. Like I said, the information that you shared, that I could feel that what you were saying was, I mean, it's mind blowing how people just don't get it. I don't understand. And there's so much more information now than it was.
yes, and at the risk of meandering off on all these different tangents, but trying to stay on course, there has been this comprehensive hybridization program. On the one extreme, you have these reptilian Draco human hybrids that have been genetically engineered, whole bloodlines of them, which turned into the royal families, which turned into the ruling financial elite bloodlines. And they're not only in our face publicly on TV, but even more importantly, they're behind the scenes manipulating things. And, they're into cult worship. They have an understanding of esoterica and real science that the mainstream does not have. They're not like us. This is very much like a they live scenario. And on the other end of that hybridization spectrum, and I think the vast majority of people fall into this category, I've come to the grim conclusion that the vast majority of people on this planet have been genetically de-evolved, if you will, hybridized to the point where they are a form of domesticated livestock that are not self-aware, that are really subject to intrusive thoughts, obsessive compulsive thought disorders, easily subject to behavior manipulation on a mass scale. The reason you were able to resonate with information that you felt was valid was because you have an intact heart center, which is the ultimate BS lie detector system. Whereas the vast majority of people, they have become disembodied. They're permanently in their headspace, out of their heart center. And when one is in their headspace, that's the happy hunting ground for all these discarnate, non-corporeal entities, for technology like voice to skull technology, for the simple media manipulation from the TV drumbeat over and over and over again, right? So they do not have the filter, the firewalls to screen out all this stuff. They cannot detect when they're being lied and BS'd to. That is the problem. So that's the continuum that I see, where the vast majority of the hybrids on this planet have been domestically dumbed down, genetically dumbed down. Like my mentor Barbara Bartholic always said, most people simply don't have the neural circuitry to understand any of this. And she did not mean that in a judgmental or elitist way. It was just a statement of fact and observation. And on the other hand, you have all these narcissist psychopaths that pollute the medical field, the journalism, the military industrial complex, et cetera, et cetera. And cycling back to the whole thing about the Dracos, they're the ones that foisted this caste system upon us, made it seem normal that there are classes, upper class, middle class, lower class. And then you have the extremes in India for many years, where you have the untouchables at the very bottom and at the top, the Brahmin class. And that's all reptilian elitism is what that is. The normalization of servitude and serfdom and slavery in the lower classes. And look what they've done. You had all the masses of people predisposed to being servants and servitors of the system. And then you add decades and decades of cultural Marxism, indoctrination, brainwashing. So not only are they oblivious, kind of non-self-aware beings, but they are defenders of this tyrannical system. What they have done with the genetic predisposition towards being taken up as a host, towards being manipulated by these intrusive voices, and then on top of that, the cultural Marxism, is they have created in the masses of the public a psychological dependence on the government. So it doesn't matter if you come to them with a boatload of books, internet links, medical abstracts, documentation, peer-reviewed from some of the top. I mean, that's the irony, Ida, is you and I can go to BitChute or some other website and just see this testimony from doctors, from immunologists, from orthopedic specialists, et cetera, et cetera. It's all there. But if you were to present that to your average abnormie muggles in the Harry Potter scheme of things, not only would they not be able to comprehend it because they lack the neural circuitry, but the programming is such that they will reject it outright, even be hostile towards you. So they become a defender of the system. They're part, without even realizing it. They've become part of Sauron's army, to use a Hobbit, Lord of the Rings analogy, right? So that's what we're dealing with here. Is you have on the one end of the spectrum all these hybridized narcissists, psychopaths, and then various degrees, gradations downward to the other end of the spectrum, whole hordes of these hybridized people. And this only came about because in the most recent series of celestially driven cataclysms between 9 and 12,000 years ago, because they lasted for quite some time, the survivors of the Earth, there was a lot less people on the surface after all these cataclysms. So these genetic engineers for the Draco reptilians and the mantis beings, we can't forget about the mantis beings as being major players in all this. They looked at the surviving population, oh, we can work with this. And then they began imbuing their genetics, their genetic codes, They move people away from symbol language, which speaks to us at a soul level, to an alphabet language, which shunts us into the left side of the brain. Languages require dogmas, priesthoods to enforce those dogmas and laws and rules. The eradication of the divine feminine, which was a key aspect of the Draco reptilian mantis control system, because women in general tend to be so connected energetically to their surroundings and what have you. So, and then you look at today, the massive inversion of what passes for feminism. That's all Draco. That's all reptilian, anti-life, anti-human. Everything is an inversion. Everything is a distortion. Right? So, in a nutshell, and trying not to be long-winded here, when one asks about the Draco and the reptilians and their genetic hybridization, that's it in a nutshell. And within that framework, within that scheme of things, there are specialized hybridization programs. Like, for example, the interest that the deep black military had in you, it's because within your DNA profile exist innate metaphysical powers and abilities, not only from your ancestral bloodline, but my educated guess would be within your DNA profile are elements of ET DNA, because you are the sum of all your parts. I don't believe someone like you would only have had incarnations on Earth. You probably have parallel existences on in other worlds, other dimensions, and you came here on assignment like a lot of us did. So that drew the attention of these deep black elements. And also, getting around to your question also about the alliance, the working in unison between deep black elements of the military on the one hand, and lack of a better term, non-human life forms on another. That has been going on for a long time. Even in the famous Roswell events, there was a survivor of that, of those crashes, and was kept alive in Wright-Patterson Air Force Base for a number of years until, according to Tom Carey's sources, some psychopath decided to kill it for, medical examination, right? So just from that story alone, the fact that a survivor of the Roswell crashes, because there was actually more than one, a survivor existed, that alone would have started the whole ball rolling in interactions with non-human races, never mind the sub rosa cult esoteric connection that adepts, warlocks, maguses have had, shamans, medicine men. It's not all bad. Medicine men, medicine women have had with non-human intelligences since the dawn of time. That's been going on all along. So what happened with Roswell and similar UFO crash retrievals, and then eventually interactions and meetings with between the deep black military, aerospace, and these non-human beings, off-world beings, is that was where the twain met. Many of the deep black military aerospace people were themselves parts of these fraternal orders, the serpent orders, which William Bramley talks about, the Brotherhood of the Dragon. The oldest form of worship on this planet that we know of is serpent worship, and heliocentricity, worship of the sun. But again, there's connections between sun worship and serpent worship. So through the fraternal orders, through the Freemasonry and Rosicrucians, what have you, you already had all these hybridized bloodlines of people that were Draco-reptilian bloodlines in positions of authority and power in the military-industrial complex. And then magically, right, all these crash retrievals start happening again. But we're at a point in time now where when these things crashed in Texas in 1896 or 1897 and elsewhere around the world, they really couldn't do anything other than store the technology or the bodies. But in a linear time progression, because they now had the means technologically to evaluate and exploit and back engineer the technology, that brought us forward to today. where what they've done is they've seemingly, with the whole concept of AI, and AI is as old as the universe, it's always been there. What they have done is they've seemingly made it as if AI and advanced computing and machine learning develop organically, just smart humans coming up with this. But from a linear time perspective, these beings, these controlling beings, they exist outside of linear time. They can manipulate things at both ends of the parade, so to speak.
Sure.
So what they did was, and it was no sweat off their backs, 2,000 years to them just is like a blink of an eye when they exist outside of a linear time framework. So they just simply had to wait, in a term that we can understand, until the technology helped along by recovered alien technology. And then, musings, people, where do thoughts come from? Where do muses come from? Why do these really brilliant people in the R&D centers always seem to come up with new, improved ways to create weapons of mass destruction instead of ways to extend our
You
our
get my
longevity?
mind going. There's so much that I mean, I have so many questions, and I'm being very patient because I'm sitting here jumping, like ready to jump out of my
I'll
seat.
stop now because I think I made my point. But
Yeah,
please continue.
I mean, yeah. So I apologize. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No. Sometimes
Yeah.
I could get on a roll, and so I
Well,
do
no, and I
apologize for
love
that.
it
So
though,
please.
but there's so much that you know. I probably should be writing things down as you're speaking because there's so much. Well, okay, let's talk about the serpent. So I was listening to you and Evie talking, and you had mentioned, I wrote a few things down, more than a few things, but you know, I mean, I wrote a bunch of stuff down. What do you, she brought up about Jesus. This is a big thing for people. I mean, obviously, we've been taught that this is our Lord and Savior for, it's the biggest between Buddhism, Christianity, Judaism, Muslim, so we have all these different. I believe Jesus is on the planet, James. I don't just believe it, I know it because I know who he is. And he knows I know who he is. And he's got a huge following. And I have traveled to him and I've met with him and I also went to go see him. I'll share with that off camera. I won't do that on camera. But I think that there may come a time, people are going to be able to start seeing these beings for exactly who and what they are. I do. I see reptilians all the time. I mean, I have them in my family. They're, although I've been told, first off, I got my own downloads, but then I got confirmation from other people that I do trust that can say, yes, Ida, what you're getting, this is a true happening for you, and about being Pleiadian, originally from Lemuria, and having this, Um, but so what do you say to, like, where do you think they're going with what they're like? What is the point? Do they want to keep the religious dogma and nonsense going to continue controlling those that buy into their religious dogma and mind control and the wars that are going on, wars that happen behind religion and using women, high priestess? I mean, I could go on and on and on with you about all this because I know that you are. What are your thoughts about that? I know I just kind of, and by the way, I need to say something, and I'm okay saying this. Ever since I was contacted and went through being abducted and, realized that I was using my lab and this and that, I feel like that I am not as intelligent as I used to be. Does that make sense? I feel like I've been slowed down and dumbed down from
Other people
before.
other people are describing what we're calling frequency jamming, where normally we could have lucid dreams. Normally we can remember our dreams. Normally we can remember some of the experiences we've had during the night, my lab experiences. But something is being done electromagnetically. It seems to have an effect on local weather patterns. And it's causing us to not remember our experiences. But there's been some breakthrough, uh, some bleed through in the recent past. So I don't think in your case that it's so much that your intelligence level, clearly you're an intelligent person, has declined in any way. I do think that the just the constant electromagnetic smog aspect is enough to create fogginess in anyone's brain, right? But on top of that, for people that are empaths, that are very psychically intuitive, it is a trick at times to consciously and subconsciously screen out things. And of course, you factor in even people that make a point of being holistic and natural and eating the right food and avoiding non-processed food, still because we live in a highly toxic environment, intentionally so. All of that can tend to dull the senses, and that's part of the control mechanism. I mean, I liken, the analogy I use is when you and I, when we have pets, for lack of a better term, we love on them. They're part of our families. We
Sure.
ensure they have good food, good water, clean water, and get plenty of exercise. But because of this animal farm, huge terrarium program that we seem to be under, it's quite the opposite. The air we breathe is made toxic. The food we are presented with is toxic. The information we're given is the distortion of the truth and inversion of the truth. Everything is bass backwards. And bass backwards is a level of stupidity and manipulation magnitudes above ass backwards. That's how bad bass backwards is, right? So as far as the whole concept of Jesus, wow, you're really asking the key questions. There was one experience I had where I was laying on a table. I was surrounded by these entities. It was very dark. I could feel by their vibe, their presence, that they were not human, and I was terrified. And through chattering teeth, I began to recite the Lord's Prayer, stuttering. And I just kept repeating it over and over and over until I found myself, I came to the realization I was back in my bedroom, right? And then I was still repeating, stuttering through chattering teeth, the Lord's Prayer. And if someone were to say to me at this moment, James, can you recite the Lord's Prayer? I think it's the 39th Psalm or whatever it is, I can't remember. Uh, to walk through the valley of the shadow of death, et cetera, et cetera. I can't recall it word for word now. But at that moment, when I needed it, right, I was able to. And I've heard, anecdotal stories from others. There does seem to be power in the name of Jesus Christ, Yeshua ben David, however you want to call it. And so to me, the fact that it does seem to have this spiritual power, which seems to have an effect on negative archontic beings. When I use the term archon, to me, it's a generic umbrella term that describes every negative parasitic entity of every dimension, of every frequency, right. Subterrestrial. They're all archons to me, right? If they manipulate humanity. And so it seems by the anecdotal testimony of many people that the name Jesus Christ, the invoking of the name of Jesus Christ, seems to have the ability to knock these creatures back and send them packing, right? So that works for me. And my views on organized religions have evolved over time. Clearly what we're seeing now with the Catholic Church overrun for so long by adepts, warlocks, pedophiles, etc., and how they're so malleable from the standpoint of whatever the current agenda is that's being promoted, the bogus climate change, all this stuff about diversity, all this stuff about inclusiveness. The Catholic Church is all for that now, right? Because the Catholic Church for lo these many centuries has been a control system. Look what they did, the so-called Albigensian Crusade against the Cathars.
George
they just
Maxwell.
slaughtered them all.
Yeah,
Jordan Maxwell talks a lot about that.
Yeah, and also suggesting that Jesus admits that he's Lucifer at the end of the Bible, and in Revelations, and I always thought that was fascinating because I think there's a lot of confusion. Even Yeshua and Jesus, some would suggest it's not the same being. Um, I'm aware that there's a name Azula in Istin, which was the original Mary and Jesus, if you want to say Mary Magdalene Jesus. Um, and I have some memory myself that I've tried to make sense of. Eh, you know, um, I don't know what to think anymore. Of course, I want to believe that.
Yeah, yeah, because so much of our history has been deliberately memory hold, obscured, distorted. Uh, the fact that our recorded history, as far as Christianity and the Old Testament is concerned, only goes back 2,000 to 3,000 years, and even the Egyptians, their cosmology states that they go back, and I mean the dynastic Egyptians who were distinct from the natives. I mean they've done DNA tests on some of the pharaohs that were mummified, and they found that some of them have type A blood, which is uh, typical of what we would perceive to be Nordic type looking beings, right? Uh, and the mummification was such that we know some of these mummies had blonde hair and blonde eyelashes.
Right.
Okay, so clearly this Nordic element had come in, and there's always been this intertwining, enmeshment between the Nordic and the serpent reptilian, because the reptilians frequently pass themselves off in many abductees will tell you this, that they pass themselves off many times as Nordic or Palladian beings, and that does not mean that Palladians and Nordics don't exist as such. It just means that these reptilians, long before the term shapeshifter became commonplace in our field, many of us knew that these reptilians in particular had the ability to alter their density, frequency, and assume guises of military people, of famous actors and actresses. Many women describe, for example, being seduced that night by whoever their particular crush is, whether it's Tom Cruise or some other person. The entities know this, and then will assume that guise and seduce her, rape her, basically, right? So when we're talking Nordics and we're talking Palladian beings, that has to be taken into account. And the fact that the ancient Egyptians were thoroughly steeped in serpent worship. I mean, look at the Kingdom headdress with the cobra and all that. That does not mean that they were all 100% reptilian, because we know in even the best, most benevolent societies, this reptilian infiltration occurs. And then you begin to have these secret societies and sects, SECTS, which are like diametrically opposed to what the main group is doing. They're fomenting their own rebellion, if you will. And that's what this is all about. Everything to do with creation, true divinity, the true natural process order of things is being subverted on a cosmic scale.
Mhm.
And this planet, because it's been essentially a closed system for so long, all the information, the information we have about Atlantis and Lemuria, for example, is anecdotal, based on people like you and I and our memories, past life experiences, or what we've picked up and learned along the way. We know it's real. We know that these societies, these civilizations existed. We know that we were part of them, right? And then you add on all the work of Edgar Casey and what have you, that which provides a lot of
Yeah.
insight into that. So that's another aspect that must be taken into account, that the Jesus story, as we understand it, goes back
I
only a couple of thousand years. What was Jesus doing prior to that, right? In whatever incarnation he was in before, like in Atlantean times, for example.
I think James, I love listening to you. I mean, so many things go through my mind, but I think that I think there's still great effort just to be able to keep things under control. I think a lot of people would lose their mind to find that There's no savior coming for them. They're so they're so dependent on something outside of themselves to make them so that they feel safe. Like there's somebody outside of them that's, I don't know if we want to say savior, but that's something, be it government, religion, some deity, whatever, anything. Because that was the hardest thing for me when supposed to be Greek Orthodox. I don't practice religion. I do live a spiritual life. Am I a person that sits and meditates all day long? Absolutely not. I have my moments of meditation. I sit still, I get silent, I go into my heart. I really do my best to think things through before I make major decisions about anything. And I'm truly self aware in that I am conscious and aware of my own thoughts, what I feel is important to me, what I value, people that I highly respect and look up to for guidance. You're one of them for sure. Um, and there's not a whole, I mean, I give everybody respect and I'm cordial and polite and kind to everybody, but there are certain people that I definitely, see as that I trust and value their information more than I would another. And I'm not saying that to blow smoke up your, you know I do hold you up in very high regard, James. And I can't articulate. I'm not able. I feel like, well, what I was saying to you was, so maybe there is a frequency jam within me somehow. I know that I have AI as part of my biofield. I can see the wiring. So I know that. And I'm okay talking about that because guess what? I know I have a soul. So, I mean,
That's a key point, because
yeah,
in a very real way, I was just talking to a colleague of mine about this very subject. Many of my labs, many of us, quite frankly, were, lack of a better term, test pilots for a lot of the stuff. A lot of the discussion that's going around now, again, it's an example between the dichotomy, the split between, to use a Harry Potter term, all the muggles on one side and people like us, the yearning for truth, yearning for understanding, the information, the places we go to get information. We know with the hydrogel, the nanolipids, the graphene, we know that there's a transceiver aspect to it. We know that the messenger RNA changes the DNA, and the DNA then becomes weaponized. It gets turned inward against us, essentially, and we get taken over by what amounts to as countless little AI computer bots. Now, that's what's happening on a mass global scale. But a lot of that stuff, quite frankly, was tested on people like us back
hmm
in the day. People are worried about the stabs, and my company wants me to get a stab. Well, a lot of us, my labs, I'm not saying this in an elitist sense. I'm just pointing out, making an observation that a lot of us would used to wake up with puncture marks, injection marks, patterns of puncture marks on our arms, forming geometric patterns, right? We'd wake up with all kinds of things, all kinds of marks on us. And a term that people, bandy about often is medical experimentation. This is far beyond experimentation. They know what they're doing. And just to complete a thought I was making earlier, what they have managed to do was, when everyone talks about AI now, and I would make the point that AI is only a dreaded, fearsome thing in our dimension. I think that in higher, more spiritually evolved dimensions and planes, AI is user friendly. It can help advanced, benevolent, spiritually oriented civilizations. Whereas and what they're rapidly doing is pulling us lower and lower into a lower fourth dimension. I would argue that we're already in a lower fourth dimension now. What they did was, because they exist beyond linear time, it was a simple matter of waiting until the technology, aided along by alien infusion of alien technology, and also working through these hybridized scientists, R&D people, chemists, people in the biomedical field, et cetera, to a point where it could seem that this mass AI rollout is organic, i.e., Earth-based, Terran-based, but nothing could be further from the truth. This is all alien in inspiration. It was the aliens, lack of a better term, reptilians, Draco Mantis beings, helped certain factions of the Greys that made this whole AI, graphene, nanogel rollout possible. Because, where do thoughts come from? Jerry Marzinski talks about that all the time. If someone, like a muse, someone gets this bright inspiration to do something, was that organic? Was that from the connection to divine source? That inspiration to create, engineer something new? And then, by their fruits ye shall know them. But if they create something that is beneficial to the human race, and also beneficial and nurturing and healing of the planet, then I would say it's from a good source. But if it's something, like what we're seeing now, I would argue, no, that's not a muse that the person got from some divine source. That was some entity working through him or her that came up with a bright idea. And because they're predisposed through genetic engineering, through neurological manipulation and what have you, they seem to come up with this bright idea, but it's not really their idea, right? And I would argue that some people, some of these like Fauci types, right?
Oh,
I mean, you look at him, what an entity that person is, right? I would argue that some of them, not necessarily Fauci, but others like him in our example, they know they're reptilian hybrids. They know that they're not quite human. And that's where this elitism comes from. That's where this seeming, this notion of having the power of life and death in a godlike fashion comes from, where they could just say,
yes.
decree that we're just going to wipe you all out because you're no longer of use to us, and we can lie through our teeth because we're answering a higher calling, because it's all hierarchical with them. There's there's all these intermediaries where you and I, we have a direct connection source because we have an activated, ever expanding heart center.
That's
No,
right.
to them, it's all clawing over each other's back, and domination and subjugation always at someone else's expense. So, just people need to keep that in mind, that what we're seeing now is proof positive that there's an alien force behind all this thing, because it's 100% anti-human, anti-life. Celeste Solum gave an interview for David Icke one time, and I almost fell out of my chair, because myself and my colleagues were talking about these archontic beings want to create a reverse polarity spin in our entire plane of existence to plunge it into a truly hellish dimension. And we're starting to see the broad outlines of that now, right? Excuse me. So when Celeste Solomon was talking about how, from her vast study of all the research papers of all these biotech firms, and it turns out that these biotech firms are intent on changing the DNA not only of humans, but of every plant, every animal on the planet, reversing the spin, because everything in our reality spins or oscillates or resonates at a certain frequency. When I heard that, I was reminded what me and my colleagues were talking about how, these dark forces want to reverse the polarity, the spin of this entire plane of existence, and plunge it into a negative, hellish.
Why? I don't mean to interrupt you, because I'm getting very anxious. When I had my awakening, or when I initially, I think I've had many moments, but my major Kundalini activation, when I heard they're killing and raping my children, that's what I heard. And I was using telepathy. Everything I say was manifesting. I literally would know what was going to happen before it happened. It gave me a great deal of anxiety, because I didn't really understand. That's when my DNA was activated, and I didn't fully understand, or I had my Kundalini activation. Everything was just opened up, and I didn't really know what was going on. I wasn't scared, in that I knew that there was something pretty amazing and miraculous. It felt that way, at least, until the targeting got really heavy. And that's when I had reached out to you years ago. I don't know if you remember that you and I had connected probably about 7 years ago. I think it was at least 2014, 15. I don't know, maybe a little later than that. It might have been a little
I
later.
think you were in Washington, D.C. at the time, right?
Yeah. I'm in Florida now. I moved away just to I had, for my own sanity, to move away and get away from, because I don't believe I'm being used. I was told that I was using 220 and back, 20 and back, and I have some memory, but I don't have a whole lot. Not like some of these other people that have come forward, and I surely won't make up stories. If I don't have them, I don't have them. What I do remember, I share it. Except some things are very private to me, because I don't think that it's not my place to. Maybe one day it will be, but not now. I don't feel comfortable sharing some things because I just don't think it's beneficial for anybody at this point. But anyways, meaning my DNA and memories that I have of Jesus and Mary and all that stuff. I just don't need to go there. I was very angry for a long time, James. Very angry.
And
I wanted answers.
just to
Yeah.
interject very quickly, and I'd like to, hear your thoughts more on this. Others have talked about having past life memories of living in biblical times,
Yeah.
being part of, Jesus' entourage, inner circle, call it what you will. So, I mean,
I definitely know I'm part of that.
yes. So it's not unusual for my labs in particular to have such memories. So I just thought I'd just point that out.
Well, I appreciate that. It's my understanding. I mean, I don't know if you're familiar with Christopher Jacobs and Sean Bond. These are two guys that I definitely appreciate their work, and they've helped me a great deal and try to, help me to make sense of some of the things. But in this, I woke up to on my news feed about Ida AI gone rogue, from a guy that was working with Miles Johnson for a while. I can't remember his name right this moment, but long story short, I knew that he was referring to me because I had in dream time the night before, remembering I had full memory of hanging by my feet and they were trying to push me into an electrical board and blow me up, and I was able to escape. I remember Simon Park saying to me, Ida, they don't like that you know who you are and what you are. And I thought a thought, and I didn't say anything to him, and he was able to read my mind and said, you're clearer now than I've ever seen you. And I'll just say that. And the thought I had, I'll share with you off camera. I will not do that here, but I'm fully aware of who my, and I consider past lives parallel lives. I don't know that, you know what I mean? That from my, but I know I have, I don't have an attachment other than how it affects me in this here and now. Otherwise, it's like reading a
Yeah,
book.
I think that's the
History.
whole lesson to be learned
Yeah.
is, how can these past parallel lives, because it's all the eternal now anyway, how can they benefit us in what's
Right.
going on now?
Right. And I'm not angry. I was very angry. I'm just not anymore. I just realized that there's my biggest thing out of all that I've learned is that nobody's coming to save me, that I have to take full responsibility for my own healing, well-being, intelligence, awareness, heart center, most importantly, what I allow, what I'm willing to engage in and what I'm not, and to really think for myself. How do I give my power away on a daily basis? And how, and we make compromises so that we can engage with family and friends and, people we just so that we can get along. And I'm not willing to do that so much anymore, James. I have a voice that, my family thinks I'm the youngest of 12 kids. They think that I'm too much for them, because I talk about things that make them uncomfortable because it challenges their belief system. And I'm not trying to convince anybody of anything. Some simple, basic questioning would be helpful. Just say it. I mean,
Yeah. Like for example, and I'm philosophical about this too. We talked about this. It's to the point now, the point in time now. We know people that have gone down from the stab. We know people that are going down from the stab. The effect it's having emotionally, all these restrictions and lockdowns, draconian measures that are being enacted, is having an extreme effect emotionally, psychologically on people. So, I'm philosophic about it. I'm not happy about it, but I understand that because of externally imposed ignorance and, innate stubbornness for many of these people, loved ones, family, friends, what have you, they decided to go along with the narrative because the psychological dependence to authority figures, dependence, and B, because to them it was a path of least resistance, right? It's well, I can't do this, I can't do this, I can't do this, I can't do this, and my business is suffering, so I'm going to go along with it.
Yeah.
They've been channelized in a certain direction, and the hypnotic drumbeat over and over, stabination, stabination, stab, 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 right? And so now we're starting to see the bitter fruit of that, and going forward, we're going to see more and more people go down, more and more people change their emotions, their behavior changing, which is happening quite rapidly. Some people undergoing a radical
I see it.
personality change. Yes.
I have, I have a brother that I have always held up. I've always admired him since I was very young. Who has been, I mean, you could throw out, I don't know, any numbers and have him, he knows how to do uh mathematics, like, I don't know what, just really good with numbers and math and geometry, all the different stuff. And now it takes him, like, he moves very slow. You could tell he had, and I don't like to talk about it because it just bothers me so, because it's happening right before my eyes. It's almost like or even when I'm talking to, like, certain family members that I know have been vaccinated, it's almost like there's this film over their eyes, like they're not there. Eh, I don't know how to explain. They're there, but they're slow
It,
to.
it, it's it's the replacements. It's the pod people. It's the invasion of the body snatchers factor. A friend of mine, she's one of us. She's had all kind of experiences. She has a restaurant and a takeout place in in the state of Victoria in Australia, and she is right. Her business is right around the corner from a stabination center. So some of the people in her neighborhood who she's known for years coming to her restaurant, friendly, amiable, how's the family, how's this, how's that? Ever since they got the stab, it's
Yes.
like, why haven't you gotten your stab? They're just so judgmental, turn into what we call mask holes, right? And she says the change in these people within days of getting the stab is so abrupt. And I really do believe that there is a replacement factor, that they were opened up to such an extent that the original term pharmacy comes from pharmacopoeia, which means sorcery, and it goes back to the Rockefeller reptile medicine,
Right,
right?
right, right.
Just the pouring of billions of dollars through grants to basically re-engineer and do a complete makeover of the medical system, turning into this reptile death cult, chamber of horrors that we see nowadays, right? So there is a replacement factor. If you saw the video of the arena in Sydney where all the children were ushered into and they started giving them the stabs, they already had screens pre-positioned. So when the kids start going down and a guy is videotaping it with his camera, they start sliding the screens over to the nurses and the medical staff. So they already had the screens there ready to block out from view, if someone goes down or a kid goes down, which they were going down, right?
James, it's so heartbreaking to think about that these
It
children.
is. So when we're talking about the medical system as as people understand it, it's a chamber of horrors. It's always been like that, but now
Yes.
it's just gone through the roof.
It's
So
just so in our face. I'll tell you, I had said no to the flu shot, I don't know, a million times. And so I had my awakening in 2011. 2012, I moved into this apartment, a condo in downtown Silver Spring. Father Silverton, Jay Parker refers to TON as being a code for the Masons or any secret society where they know they can find their people there. I went through, all kinds of stuff that I just don't talk about anymore because I don't think it's, maybe one day I will. But I said no to taking a flu shot, I don't know, 1,000 times. And one day I said, okay. And what was interesting was, and I learned this, there was a African man pharmacist that was always working. And I don't know if this has any like influence on my decision, But that one day I went in there, it was a white woman in a white coat behind the cat. He had gone on vacation. And I said, yes. So I don't know if it was something like under mind control or code that I could trust her to get the vaccine for, take the flu shot. But I sat there and I sat, and my apathy sat in or settled in. And I looked at her and I knew I should get up and move, but I didn't, James. I sat there and let her put that, and she looked like she knew she was going to poison me. I was like this. I couldn't, and it took a while. I mean, and I went to my doctor and she said, Ida, something's attacked your neurological system. And the only thing I had done was get a flu shot. It disrupted my whole circuitry. And now I do remember being lifted off my couch in the middle of the night like this, straight out. And I said in my consciousness, who's doing this to me? And I was blank slated. So I often tease saying, I hope it was my star family coming to remove that shit out of my body. Excuse my language. Yeah, it was horrid. I will never let them, they don't come near me. Now I did have 2 crowns. This is crazy. I had 2 crowns put in because I let them uh see, this has been happening the past 5 days. I don't know if it's because of the planetary alignment or what's going on, but I'll be talking and I lose words. Like I can't get a sentence out. And other people have said they've been noticing that with themselves as well. So I know it's something. But anyways, the dentist shifted right in front of me, James. She was working on my teeth right in front of me. And when she got up and walked away, she had this weird long like walk, like she wasn't walking like a human. She was just kind of like swaying back and forth. It was weird. I don't know how to explain it. And I'm like, here I go again, offering myself up to these beings.
Well, we were talking about how, going forward, and we've seen this process unfold over time, but the fundamental constants are changing. If one studies, some of the research out there about ciphered burst, the explosions that come from the galactic core and radiate out in every direction, and how these galactic waves, super waves, can, suffering from brain fog now, because normally I would know the name of the scientist who talks the most about this. I'm a big fan of his work, but these galactic super waves, come to our solar system periodically, along with large, planetary bodies and comets and mini solar systems, and wreak havoc, basically. So the galactic superwave and other energetic factors are changing the fundamental constants. So I really believe, and this is not just hopium on my part, I'm looking at more from a Sun Tzu perspective. Time is on our side. It's not on their side. They're in a panic mode. They're in a panic mode to rush everything into place because there's a celestially driven timetable that they have to adhere to. They know that at a certain point in time, we may already have reached it, where things will start to unravel beyond their control, no matter how hard they try, right? So one aspect of that, of the fundamental constants changing, and just to cite one example, a number of stories appeared in scientific journals, probably 10 years or more by now, because of the reductionist nature of science these days. Everything's reduced down to a particle or a subparticle. The way the scientists and the physicists described it is there was some new particle being emitted by the sun, which is causing even faster decay of normally stable elements, right? So in other words, the very fabric of what we call reality, material objects, everything is just starting to decay and, basically, vaporize, so to speak, faster, right? And they were alarmed by this development. And then before long, all those articles just disappeared from the internet, right? So the point I'm making is the fundamental constants are changing, whether it's a particle from the sun or something else going on. I think it's going to be harder for these sewer scum to hold their human shape. I think as time goes on in these daily morning press briefings where they lambast us for, even wanting to have freedom or wanting to step outside or whatever, that we're going to start seeing some of them undergo radical shape shifts, right? And I
It's
would
already,
encourage,
yes, yeah.
yeah, and I would encourage your viewers to, if they haven't already heard about this individual, go to BitChute, look up Frequency Fence, who's done fantastic work over the years. All of his or her stuff was scrubbed from YouTube, disappeared, forgotten, had no idea what happened to him or her, and then BitChute is created, and then voila, there is Frequency Fence again. And what Frequency Fence does is, among other things, he or she gets all these clips from Hollywood movies and then freeze frame and shows when these morphs take place, when this well-known actor or actress starts to shapeshift. And they do like a written analysis. Okay, observe the eyes, observe the fingers, yada, yada, yada. Brilliant work.
I'm going to look that up. Yeah.
Yeah, I've been a fan of Frequency Fence for a long time. And then there's another person, I think his last name is Crenshaw. Don't quote me on that. But what he's done is he's got videos on BitChute that shows news prisoners where suddenly they just start speaking gobbledygook that doesn't even make sense, or they freeze and they just look at the camera like something has gone on in their minds.
I've seen that. I've seen
they're
some
like
of those, yeah.
in weird cyborg fashion, they blitzed out or something. So I think we're going to see more and more of that, and they're not going to be able to stop that process. They're just going to unfold because they know by this point, they know that the vast majority of the muggles, the sheepanoids, the vast majority of them will just go along with whatever narrative is being currently spewed out, no matter how contradictory it is to the narrative last week. It doesn't matter anymore, right? They're just going to continue lie and lie and lie. And they know, because the masses are hypnotized, incapable of independent thought, that they're going to go along with it, to the point where, I'm kind of torn between the term non-participating character, because a lot of these NPCs are actually force multipliers of the system. They turn into mask holes. They turn into, power tripping freaks that, are supporters of the system. But on the other hand, outside of that, they really have no say in the matter, because you can ignore them. I think what's going to happen is, as time goes on, what they're supposed to be, I hope it happens, a mass trucker rebellion, for lack of a better term, in Australia, where the truckers were really the only, they were really the only people that could make a difference, because they said, because they don't want to be stabbed in order to, cross state borders, what have you. And, their businesses have already suffered immensely from all this. So they've said, we're not only going to go on nationwide strike, we're going to block their highways. And now, from what I understand, the bikers have come on board.
Mm-hmm.
And what that's going to do is, it's going to make people on the fence. And by that, I mean, they've already had their businesses suffer. They've lost their businesses. They've already seen how it's personally impacted them. They've seen one or more of their loved ones go down from the stabs. Those people are, I feel, going to go on the side of the truckers and the bikers and against all this. Now, the sheepanoid muggles, they're not even going to be factors. What's going to be interesting is, as time goes on, because the muggles have to eat, the cops have to eat, the doctors and nurses have to eat. If the truckers shut everything down, it begins to have a cascading effect on all these key nodal points in the infrastructure. That's going to have a major impact. It has a potential to have a major impact. And after a while, even the muggles will be screaming at the government, what are you doing for us? We've done everything we wanted you to do, and now we have no food. Well, you know what? You made your own bed. And here's another thing too. A lot of people think, oh, all these ambulance drivers and paramedics and not doctors, because doctors seem to be exempt from the stab, but nurses, now they're joining our side because they're refusing to take the stab. Oh, not so fast. There is such a thing as redemption. There is such a thing as accountability. But just because they're opting out of the stab doesn't absolve them of taking part in and turning a blind eye to all the atrocities that they've seen that's happened, right? But suddenly it becomes an issue when they're mandated to take the stab. Oh, wait a minute, you're not joining my side. because each one of you have a responsibility now, right? Because you're starting to feel the pain the way we've been feeling the pain. So it's incumbent upon them, if they want to get on our side, they got to earn the right. And how do they earn the right? By going public, by putting out videos, by going talking about this, right? Because the path of least resistance is just to like hunker down and, hide for cover. Well, I'm not going to take the stab, but, I'm just going to mind my P's and Q's. And well, that's not good enough, because they've taken part in a mass murder factory for long enough, right? So, they're like rats abandoning a sinking ship. And I want to make the message very clear. Don't think you're joining our side, because we're fighting for humanity.
Right.
You've been killing humanity. So don't think that just by refusing to stab, you become one of us. That's not how it works.
Right. Thank you for that statement, for sure, James.
That goes for all the cops too. That goes for all the cops who don't take the jab, because they were enforcing all this stuff. You're not on our side. You have to earn the right to be on our side.
Yeah. I have gotten to a point where, and I don't like to say this, but it is a reality for me, if you will. Like, I've kind of slowly gotten my mind in position to accept that it's possible I will lose a family member due to getting these vaccine or the jab. I don't like to say the word. I mean, I don't care really. I'm not gonna. I don't want the video removed, but I want to be able to speak freely as well. That's another thing. Like, we shouldn't have to, be be cautious of words we use, because they want to control the narrative and what's shared, and the influence that may be given due to watching this video. I don't know, but James, so where do you think I wanted to say, while you were sharing, you were talking about the sun. I remember in one of my alternate realities, I saw pulses of light it was a beautiful day. It was absolutely gorgeous. People were swimming in the river. It was beautiful. I remember walking up and saying, is the water warm? There were people in there, and they're like, yeah, come in. It's so beautiful. And there was a cloud. So there was no sun rays or, sunshine. And all of a sudden, how like you're outside and it's cloudy, and then everything brightens up because the cloud moved from the sun. So the sun's now, that's how it was. So it caught my attention. I went to look up because I thought it would be cold in the water. It was cloudy, whatever. I look up, and there's just pulses and pulses and pulses of light coming out of, like, I can't even tell you. It was absolutely magical, beautiful. And I just remember watching and just standing in awe, and then I woke up. So I believe that this has already happened, and we're just slowly moving into a different frequency, if you will. Those that are ready and willing to move forward and continue on the spiritual development, ascension, even that word, I think it's just a level of consciousness, awareness that we are part of individually and as a collective. Those that are ready for higher states of consciousness and beingness and service to others, and all the other, fanciful words that we use to describe what's taking place on an individual and collective phenomena, or whatever word. I mean, I don't know what word to use. I don't articulate myself as well as you do, trying to explain what I want to say, but I think you got the gist of what I'm saying. So do you think some people like Dolores Cannon talk about other people going to certain 3D worlds, and those that are moving into higher states of consciousness will be moved into a different dimension, or will travel to a different dimension, or, I mean, and then some say that we're in this holographic reality, and that nothing, I mean, scientifically is solid. So we drop down in these frequencies to to uh, this physical reality in order to have experiences for our soul growth and expansion. But the higher you go up, the lighter you become, the more fluid you are, as you say, and you're able to experience different realities of existence and so forth. Like, did you get what I just said?
Yeah, yeah. I think an important aspect of that is if we regain an understanding, at least a basic understanding of what used to be called the ether physics.
Ether, very
Uh,
good. Yes.
the fluid, the medium through which everything passes through. When we're astral traveling, we're passing through the ether. When we're going through the inner planes, either remote viewing wise or astral bodies or whatever the case may be, we're moving through the fluid, the medium of the ether in all its many forms, right? People talk about, this dimension, that dimension. Yes, there are variations of the same thing, but there can only be one thing. There is only one thing, and we're a part of it. So what they've done with the manipulation of science, mathematics, astronomy, astrophysics, etc., it's like the mathematicians have taken over astrophysics. Everything is, reduced to a mathematical formula, and what they've done is they've marginalized and been dismissive of the old concept of the ether. Now, what's interesting is all these adepts, warlocks, black magicians, they know the ether is real because they work with it all the time. And what happens with these deep black aerospace military programs is oftentimes what they will do. David Adair is an example of this. If you go look up David Adair's work, rather than recruit somebody out of MIT who's already been brainwashed by what passes for modern science and modern physics, and this happened to a friend of mine, right? What they do is they set up all these science fairs, especially in the old days in the 50s and 60s, science fairs, competitions, and it's really a means of recruiting. So when they see a young kid who may still be in high school, right, and they also set up trade schools where in these engineering and electronic schools, the professor may actually be an NSA asset, for example. This happened to a friend of mine. And then they just keep their eyes open for these people, these young
Yeah.
people that are
Yeah.
coming up with these really creative ideas, which could be, made secret and compartmentalized and weaponized, right?
Yeah.
And that's how they recruit. They want to get them before they've been brainwashed by this bogus educational system. And a big part of that is understanding ether physics, to what it used to be, right? Because the ether pretty much explains everything, the plasma electric nature of the universe. And so the point of relevance to you and I and others like us is if you look at the basic model of what my labs are capable of, consciously or when they're externally manipulated by a controller, be it a human or an alien controller. We can pass through solid objects. We can bilocate. We can teleport. We can utilize telekinesis. And a lot of this is a function of, for lack of a better term, our latent DNA, alien DNA. It's there. It's called dismissively junk science by modern geneticists. Nothing junk about it. So I know people that have been utilized by aliens to work, made to sync up essentially with alien technology, where they're hooked up to alien computer systems. They can read the alien simple language. They can work with it. They can sit in an alien control panel, navigation system, and fly certain types of craft. So that know-how, that body of knowledge is there anyway. It's in the information field all around us, part of the ether, but it's also within our DNA, which is a transceiver, a sender and receiver of information. And notice how with the stabinations now, the messenger RNA is changing the DNA, changing the polarity, doing all this stuff, potentially to plunge everyone even after they die into a hellish AI quantum cloud kind of scenario, right?
I mean, but okay, so you now get your if you want to say triggered, like why? Why would they want to do that? I mean, what is it that they're truly gaining? Just domination and control? Like, what is it that they're wanting? What I don't understand. What is it that they want from doing this? just
Yeah,
so they had so
I think it goes
our,
back to the celestially driven timetable that they know that there's going to be a mass uh,
and they're going to
extinction
lose
level
power
event
and
anyway.
control.
They're going to lose power and control, so they might as well get their money's worth, so to speak, by attempting to plug everyone into, the consciousness of all these people into an artificial cloud, so to speak. Now we know from my lab and alien abduction experiences, astral abductions are real. Every legitimate alien abductee has been, most of them have been astrally abducted. We know deep black elements of the military, mind controllers, they can astrally abduct people. So we already, as a template, we know our consciousnesses can be hijacked from us and taken someplace, put into a virtual training environment. That's already happened to a lot of us. So if you scale that up, and then they start putting all the stuff in the stabinations, and then the frequency modulation kicks in later, maybe already have started with the 5G. The potential exists, like I was saying, doesn't mean it has to happen. But I'm saying that the technology and the potential exists to plunge a lot of people's consciousness even after they've shed this mortal coil, after they go down from the stabs. Okay. So what I'm saying is we have it within us to transcend that. Up till now, from a MyLab and alien abductee perspective, these parasitic archontic aliens and these military controllers can exploit our experiences. When they send us back in the morning, it's like, if we left with any fragmented memories at all, that was a weird dream. Meanwhile, they've used us off-world. They've used us, sync this up with alien technology, all this other stuff. Point of relevance is all that capability resides within us already. And one doesn't have to be a MyLab. You see the disciplines all over the world, the yogis, the medicine men, the medicine women, the shamans, right? And look at the efforts they've taken, to eradicate the divine feminine, divine symbol language, the the traditional shaman culture all over the world, and then label it as as voodoo mysticism that has no basis in science, right? And then on the other hand, look at the efforts that they've made to maintain this shame-based persona. Okay, these aren't holy divine bodies. These are blood bags. We're shame-based, born in original sin, yada yada yada. From day one, the shame basing occurs to get us out of our heart center, get us into our headspace, which is a happy hunting ground for all this programming and all these marauding entities giving us all these bad thoughts and influencing our behavior, right? So if they'll go to that extent, the point of relevance is if they go to that extent, the shame basis, they're terrified of us. That's what I
Well,
take away from it.
that's yeah,
You know what I mean?
yeah. Well, that's exactly how they've manipulated. I mean, I can just speak just from my own experience. I mean, I don't mean to continue to refer to myself, but that's really the only real reference I can give my own experience, right? Knowing my own experience, what I've experienced, I do my best to make sense of it. But yeah, shame has been a big for all of us. I mean, especially in, I'm Arabic, I'm half Arabic, Palestinian, and my mother's Irish Scottish, right? So in the Arabic culture, it's a common, and it wasn't that I grew up. My father was quite a lover. He was a ladies' man, and did his thing and whatever. So I wasn't like my brother and sister both married Arabs. I didn't, but it's almost like it's naturally in the DNA already to be submissive to our husbands, or to be to walk around in shame or feeling not equal to our man or whatever. I don't know if equal is the right word, but always having this idea that we're not uh powerful or good enough or not valued and so forth.
Unworthy.
Unworthy. There you go. That's right. And so, and I've kind of been the one, the black sheep of the family. And I'm not saying that all my choices when I was younger was the best, but I also know I was being used in my lab, and it's not an excuse. It's just a reality. I definitely was, and I was using, being as a sex slave and drug trafficking, and I've seen a lot of things. I've seen a lot of things. And when I had my awakening and realized, and I remember saying to my sister, Frida, where have I been my whole life? It was almost like it was a movie of somebody else I was watching. Like it wasn't me. Like, who was that person? It was quite like that, cut and dry. Like James, I don't know how to explain it, but it was, And then I remember standing up outside my body and walking around my apartment. My body's on the couch, and they, they not only do gang stalking in the is your son there? I want to watch what I'm saying if he's in the room. Is it Miss Kylie? No.
Oh, she just stuck something into the door and put something there. So I'm
I
okay.
just think she's so awesome, honestly.
Thank you.
Yeah. But I could talk to you forever about all this stuff, James, all of it. It's just mind blowing. Well, and I really enjoyed listening to you and Evie. I remember reaching out to her, I don't know, 10 years ago about the love bite scenario. I went through that. I mean, I had a Kundalini activation. Now, Seven Bomar, I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he's, I appreciate a lot of his work as well. And he talked about how women hold light in their womb, and that these beings would basically eat our light, if you will. Like they feed off of our energy and our light. And I remember being in a love bite scenario and I'm okay talking about this now because it was years ago, and I honestly just don't care if people get it or don't get it, because if you get it, you know what I mean. Meaning that I shouldn't have said it like that, but whatever. During this highly charged sexual episode of this, that they feed off of your energy, the energy that's created from locking in either to your base chakra or your sexual. Do you understand what I'm saying? I've listened to you lecture about it forever, but I don't know how to say it the way you do.
Yeah, it's emotional, energetic harvesting in all its forms. Yeah.
Yeah. And I also, yeah, and I remember, like you said about, I don't consider it my dream time. I think it was another, an astral, place where there was buildings and people and the whole bit. And I remember being told, don't walk up to the car, and because a car had pulled up, and there was two guys in it, and I wanted to go question them. And this woman jumped out and said, don't walk up to the car, follow me. And she was questioning me, and I said, I'm not going to answer anything until those guys come over. And I think they were questioning, what was I doing there? Who am I? Why was I there? How was I able to get there? Maybe, I don't know. These are thoughts. And I had come out of that state of existence. But I'll tell you, 2014, and Michael Lee Hill talks about this. And I know, I mean, I don't know, I don't remember you talking too much about Anunnaki stuff, but maybe you have. Most of the stuff I listen to of yours is about Draco and my lab and all that. But
yeah, and there's a cogent argument that suggests that the Anunnaki are themselves reptilians and Draco, just a faction of them. So, and that's how I've always regarded the Anunnaki as being more reptilian than anything.
Yeah. Well, so Dan Winters talks about Anu, which means king, right? Had a wife and he had a concubine. Uh, so he had the mother of Enlil, who was the younger son, but his lover, his concubine, his maiden, whatever you want to call, she was Pleiadian. Guess what her name was, James? Aida. If you listen to Dan Winters.
Yeah.
She was the mother of Enki. And then you had, but she was just a lover. She was a hidden lover of this being, I suppose. And so I think that they have, okay, and then I've also heard that Mary Magdalene, they chopped her energy up into 9 aspects of 9 women, and the DNA was put into these different 9 women on the I'm just saying, I don't know if it's, but it kind of makes sense to me if I think about it, and just from my own memory. And
yeah, well, many women have a spiritual kinship, if you will, and seem to have ancestral memories of being Mary Magdalene or connected to her in some way. And I think that the women that have these these memories, they may not have been literally the only one. There could be a number of women that have the same or similar Mary Magdalene, in our example, memories. They're all kind of, spawned from the same divine feminine aspect.
Well, if we
tracking
think
back to
about,
Mary, yeah.
right, if we think about that, there's been what, this is like the sixth time humanity's gone through this, where we've been trying to, to move up, but we end up falling, going back into old, behaviors and choosing technology over our spiritual development. How many times that we've started over and it's the same replay or repeated these cycles, these same, and yeah, and energetically, if we understand there's an oversoul, and so this could be, I mean, I have no attachment of being anything other than who and what I am here and now. But it is fascinating to me. And I also understand that the word Eve in Magar means sex. It's not actually a person, so to speak. Although, from the reptilian perspective, it is, because they, like, for instance, Simon Parks claiming to be the atom and talking about I don't know if you know that, but he did. Anyways, that they talk about the green eyes, that there's less than 2% on the planet, but on the planet that have green eyes, but it's a particular color green eyes of the 2% that were used in part of the power structure in past lives. And those are the ones like the Max Spears and other people that were targeted or used in these My Lab programs, and Sarah Adams, and, of course, they don't have green eyes, but I'm saying that they hold this DNA from ancient, maybe back in the Egyptian days and so forth. So my point with what I'm trying to say is that, and you talk about this too, is these bloodline families that are being. Are you okay? Is everything okay? I don't want to. I know that we talked. It's a little past. I could talk to you forever, and I don't want to hold you up, especially if she's just getting up. I would love to have you back.
It's
more.
it's the,
More. Where? What? What?
oh, it
James?
just like these come a certain point in time, because excuse me, asthma kicks in, and the more I talk, it's just a bugbear of being a podcaster from down under, because the time zones are so off, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, the only way I can get certain interviews in is either early morning my end, or late at night my end, right? Because so many people in North America are already asleep or something by the time, So it's just one of those things where I got to get certain things done before the house starts to come alive. You know what I mean?
Right. So I don't want to hold you up anymore, but I would love to be more, I'm not one of these interviewers that are like so structured and have everything perfectly. Just to have you on and be able to have this discussion with you. Yeah.
I want you on my show too. Please, I'm extending the invitation, and
well, that would,
yeah, and definitely. And,
well,
the
James, you would be my first yes. I'm saying yes to you because you
okay, cool.
kindly extended. Well, I've been invited to others, and I haven't been ready, but because your knowledge and wisdom and your experience and your intelligence, I know that you would be able to help me get out what I'm trying to say better, or at least articulate myself. One, and I trust you too, and not saying I don't trust everybody, but I am particular about who I've only done James Rink, and that was many years ago. And I'll tell you, he got phone calls from people saying the reason she's being attacked or targeted is because of who she is. He called me up. We talked about it, meaning my DNA. Some people are still able to look at you and tell you the DNA you have, who you are.
There's
all
no
that.
doubt looking at you that there's something, even within the MyLab abductee scheme of things, that there's something unique about yours, which makes it of interest to one or more parties, right? So,
well, I appreciate you so much, James. I think you and Kylie are amazing. Your son is a handsome young man. I wish you both. Yes, absolutely. And I would love to come on your show anytime. I mean, cool. I would need some help getting out what I don't know why. Yeah.
We'll flesh all that, and I know come the day that you'll do fine. You'll do great, and you'll be an inspiration, as you are, to my listeners as well as already to your listeners.
that's my whole thing, James. Yeah, is I do want people to know that we are going to get through this. Those that are ready and willing to do the inner work and really step up in their sovereignty, and just if you could just, think things through before you make decisions. Don't you
Yes,
you know, and learn how
and
to
not be in
respond.
a state of high anxiety and high emotion when you make those choices, right? So
Yeah,
that's important.
yeah. And I had to work through that. I had to work through a lot. Well, I heard you saying to Evie, like, we're going to be the ones that say, screw y'all, we're healing and we're going to do this and we're going to be able to move past your frequency fences and all your mind control, manipulation, and emotional, manipulation, all the nonsense. I mean, every day I get up and I choose and set my intention just to be the best I can be. And I'm not perfect, but I am very conscious and aware of my surroundings. I pay attention, and I try not to be on guard, like defensive, but sometimes I feel I have to. I don't know if the word defensive is right, but at least say, hey, wait a minute, something's making my radar go up, and
Yeah,
I need to pay attention.
situational awareness is
Yeah,
just
yeah, there you
something
go.
that
That's
we
right.
need to unconsciously cultivate.
Yeah.
Where it's there all the time. We just don't have to be conscious of it. Yeah.
So thank you for coming on, James.
Thank you.
I appreciate you. And maybe, again, when we'll see how things go by the end of the year, maybe you'll consider coming back on and I can,
Oh, I'd love to. It'd be an honor. Thank you
yeah,
so much.
I appreciate it. Give Miss Kylie a big hug and kiss. I haven't met her yet, but I feel her energy. I think I really do. I take up for my sisters that are awake and aware, and I am a lover of them, meaning not in that way, but let's do this. Let's empower, help each other, support each other. It's so important. It really is. I'm not saying men haven't gone through some stuff, but us women, we need to stand up together and in a unified way. I'm not a man hater. I love men, James. And one day I'll meet me a beautiful beloved and I'll be able to have that as well. But right now, I need to really just stay focused on healing, continuing my healing journey. I think I've come a long way. And yeah,
You've done a fantastic job, and you'll continue to do so. And you're an inspiration to me, and I really mean that, and to many others too. So just continue the fine work you're doing, and I'll definitely pass on your regards to Kylie, and she reciprocates. She told me to say hello and
yeah,
send her love to you as well.
very good. Have a wonderful day, and you'll be seeing me, you know, checking out your post. I'm getting ready to post one of your videos because actually you just did a commentary on the Rockefellers, and yeah, people probably would. So, guys, first off, before I go, anybody that sees this video, I highly, highly encourage you, if you're interested and want to know more about my lab, Super Soldier, uh, Draco Reptilians, or anything, in that arena. If you want to learn, become more aware, do your own research for sure. But James Bartley is definitely, probably from my perspective, I think that I honestly believe this. I think that you have done more for this community and the My Lab than any other researcher or lecturer or that I've come across. And I've come across a lot. And I'm not saying I love Alex Collier. I love, there's other people that have, but I've learned so much from you. And I can honestly say so much of the information that you share from my own experiences, I just know that you're the real deal and know what you're talking about. I mean, I think a lot of us in this arena feel that way about you, James. So thank you for your hard work and your dedication to bringing truth and real um, scientific data for all of us to be able to learn from you. And yeah, I think you're awesome. But
Thank you. I really
anybody, yeah,
appreciate that.
yeah, everybody go check out James, check him out on Facebook, go to his YouTube channel or Cosmic Switchboard group. He has a group on Facebook, or reach out to him for a consultation. You think you have had experiences, or you have questions, or you have some maybe memory of dreams or anything that you're questioning and you want to find out more, this is the guy I would definitely recommend you reach out to him. James, thank you for coming on Conscious Heart Solutions.
Thank you so much,
Have
Ida.
a fantastic day. Yes, and I'll talk to you